a difference several months makes. It would never have occurred to any of us in January that all of your bright ideas about investments in your districts would not be included in this bill. It never occurred to any of us in January that we would be stand here with little shower caps on our microphones and masks, and some of you behind plexiglass trying to debate the people's budget, and yet here we stand. SB74 is the budget bill for the 2021 fiscal year. This bill is the result of hard work over this past month in the midst of grappling with a public health and economic worldwide pandemic that has changed all of our lives. Because of the current public health crisis, California now faces a $54 billion budget shortfall as we approach the new fiscal year. The budget we are passing today represents a two-party deal between the Senate and the Assembly. Although we are working hard to obtain a three-party deal that includes the administration, today we have the opportunity to pass a budget that stands on its own in meeting our constitutional deadline for passing a balanced budget by June 15th. This legislative budget agreement closes the $54 billion budget shortfall by following the same reasonable framework set forth in the governor's May revision, with a mix of spending reductions, temporary new revenues, borrowing, deferrals, existing federal funds used, reserves, and anticipated additional federal funds. The legislative budget agreement also includes a trigger component should the additional federal funds not materialize. This trigger establishes solutions that would not go into effect until October 1st if the additional federal funds do not come in. These trigger solutions include the use of additional reserves and deferrals as a means to minimize programmatic reductions. We learned tough lessons during the last downturn, and cuts to programs that our state's vulnerable populations depend upon oftentimes exacerbate the problems we are trying to address and take precious time, effort, and resources to restore to prior levels. We spent years budgeting responsibly and building a significant reserve specifically to avoid the painful actions that we were forced to take during the Great Recession. And although none of us anticipated that we would be facing a fiscal crisis as unique and severe as we are currently facing, utilizing reserves and other tools at our disposal in order to minimize reductions to critical programs is the responsible thing as policymakers to do. With that said, I want to note that this legislative budget agreement would end the budget year with more reserves, over $11 billion, than the governors may revise should we receive additional federal funds. This would include the maintenance of over half of the mandatory deposits to the rainy day fund and all of the safety net reserve. If the additional federal funds do not materialize and the trigger solutions go into effect, we would still end the budget year with half of the mandatory balance of the rainy day fund and total reserves approximating $7.5 billion. The Constitution provides two key deadline requirements for the annual state budget. One, it requires the governor to present his budget by January 10th every year. And second, it requires the legislature to pass a balanced budget by June 15th. Nothing in the Constitution requires the governor to only present a budget that the legislature agrees to. And similarly, nothing in the Constitution requires the legislature to only pass a budget that the governor has concurred in. And just as the governor met his constitutional obligation on January 10th, today the legislature meets its constitutional obligation by hearing and hopefully passing this responsible, balanced, and thoughtful budget that closes the $54 billion shortfall and keeps California's finances in sound condition. I appreciate the acknowledgments for my work and the work of the Budget Committee, and all of those of you who have the honor and privilege of serving as chair of a committee. You know the work it takes to do the people's work and to review bills and just to do your job with integrity. So I appreciate the acknowledgement. Thank you very much. And let me please thank the public employees, our staffs, who spend countless hours preparing documents for our review. Let me be clear, documents for our review, because we are the duly elected members of this body who are responsible for making decisions and taking the vote. I feel a obligation as chair of Budget Committee when we vote on the budget bill in chief, after hearing some of the discussion and debate, to do two things: to separate fiction from fact, and to separate process from content. Fact: as a result of the passage of Prop 25, the budget bill must be in print for 72 hours. And so while we often stand on this floor and wax forth nostalgic as the good old days were great, the good old days did create a scenario where you would come on the floor and see a budget document that you had to vote on. This bill has been in print for 72 hours. That's fact. Fact: the constitutional deadline of June 15th has been in existence since 2011. Let's talk about the difference between process and content. This is my 10th budget. I've heard a number of people talk about how many budgets there have been. And every year, there is a challenge to process. Whether we have a conference committee, then there's a challenge to the agenda and how the conference committee was designed and run. If it's a big 3 negotiation, then people want big 5. If it's big 5, people want something else. And so, suffice it to say, over my 10-year experience, the process will always be challenging. I sort of want to say get over it, but I won't. What I will say is, this year, we all acknowledge why it was a challenge. It was no fault of our own. And everyone who has the duly elected responsibility of casting a vote had the opportunity to review the documents, step up, and represent your constituents. Content: we're supposed to dig deep and debate and talk about what's the appropriate use of public funds. We're supposed to have content conversation that's fact-based. Fact: most of the new funding that's been referenced here on the floor today are funding requirements of chaptered bills. If you don't want to expand state employee service to do the work of the government, don't introduce a bill that does so. These are chaptered bills that are law that we are required to then make sure we have the resources available to get the work done. That's fact. If you want to abate the integrity of the bill that's already a law, acknowledge that. Let's do that separate. I appreciate and value all the ideas about what we should be doing, ways that other states are maybe more efficient or effective at administering government. I appreciate hearing all those. Today is our opportunity to talk about and make a decision about what's before us in SB74. So let's talk about values. I think that's fair. If you truly value investments in California's most fragile, then I'm not sure how you can't support a bill that does indeed keep a needed veterans home open, that does continue to fund the MSSP program for seniors to keep them out of nursing homes, that does continue to fund after-school programs, that does continue to provide resources through K through 12 education at the 2019 funding levels. A budget that does expand child care slots for our essential workers so they can continue to do their work. A budget that does provide slots for alternative payment programs. Who qualifies for those programs? People who go to work every day. A budget that does provide a 5% base increase to our institutions of higher learning, UC and CSU, and maintains the Cal Grant Award for low-income students in private colleges. A budget that does include, that restored the cut that was proposed and may revise to IHSS workers, again, helping the medically fragile stay in their homes. A budget that does include a cost of living adjustment to the SSI portion of the SSI SSP eligibles in all of our districts. A vote against this budget sends a clear message about values. A vote for this budget does acknowledge your support of providing $10.8 million in general fund to those in the Early Start Specialized Therapeutic Services, infant development programs, and independent living services within our Department of Developmental Services. A vote for this budget acknowledges savings of $1.7 billion thanks to the MCO tax. A vote for this budget provides $5 million to provide hearing aids to children who don't qualify for Medi-Cal. A vote against this budget is a value statement. A vote for this budget maintains general fund spending on Medi-Cal optional benefits. What's a Medi-Cal optional benefit? Dental benefits, optometry, optician, incontinence creams and washes, diabetes prevention programs. A vote for this budget maintains the general fund support for the Caregiver Resource Center. A vote for this budget provides $500 million to cities for homelessness, public health, and other services to combat COVID-19. A vote for this budget provides an additional $350 million for homelessness. A vote for this budget includes $50 million for the iBank and grants to small businesses, assistance through their Small Business Finance Center. And so I appreciate all of those of you who in January had bright, creative ideas about additional investments for your districts. I had those ideas too. But let me be clear, there is no pork in this budget. None of us got additional resources to invest in these innovative, wonderful programs that our constituents could use and deserve. This budget is the best we can do to make sure that we don't cause extra undue harm onto those who have already been victimized, either economically or through their own public health as a result of a virus. This is not where we thought we would be in January, but colleagues, it's where we are today. And so we want to talk values, we want to talk process, we can do that. As state legislators, we have a responsibility to legislate and appropriate. And on June 15th, we have a constitutional obligation to review the spending plan for the state of California. The spending plan is before you in the form of SB74, and I would strongly ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell. Madam Secretary, please call the roll. Ayes 29, noes 11. The Senate amendments are concurred in.